Now, tell me that it's working. Good Lord. It is so complicated to make things work on live streaming sometimes. Ah, that's what it is. So that means that my ingestion key must have changed, and that's why I was having trouble, but it looks like I've fixed it, and we're going to be going live. There we go. Sounds through. So sorry about that, guys. It's been one of those days where I wound up with all sorts of silly things happening, and because I must have used my phone, it changed the ingestion key to compensate, and so I had to re-plug in my ingestion key, which I should know. That does happen from time to time. It does happen. Anyway, so you will find the start time down in the description, so you can get past all of this nonsense. Look, I really do apologize to everybody. This video was supposed to be scheduled at 1 o'clock, and of course I had to move it because I locked myself out of my house, and I did a little quick video on my phone to let you all know, but I do apologize. I know it will mess with a lot of people's time schedules depending on where you are in the world. Now, I'm going to do a Q&A for Dungeon Masters, so get ready with all your questions. I will provide a little bit of information so people have time to ask questions and get into the chat and type things up. I do have a moth flying around in my office, so if I start swatting at things, that's probably what I'm swatting at. Okay, so let's get started, shall we? Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about primarily Dungeons & Dragons 5e, but I am quite willing to talk about Dungeons & Dragons in general. This is our Dungeon Master questions and answers session or workshop. Call it what you will. I do these once a month, and this is my opportunity to give you my 2 cents or 10 cents, and you decide whether you like that information or whether you'll find that useful or not, and whether you can do it yourself, which is always nice. So I'm ready to go. I've managed to make sure that I'm actually in the center of, well, roughly in the center of the screen, and I've got myself a different hat today. So this is basically me giving you an opportunity to interact, and I have been looking at a lot of information around backgrounds, and backgrounds seem to be focusing more on characters, I've noticed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about backgrounds with you while people type in, and you can ask any question regarding Dungeons & Dragons you like, and if I have the answers to them, I will certainly respond. So what I've found though, so type into the chat right now, okay? What I've found with backgrounds is there seems to be a really strong focus on backgrounds for individual characters, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's to be encouraged. What I think the driving force though for Dungeons & Dragons is all of the party members integrating together and creating the story, rather than everybody having sort of like their own little episode that revolves around them. Now, there are people who do or run games like that, and I'm not dissing them in any way because I have done that sort of thing myself. But I think it's important for, as a Dungeon Master, to try to highlight to players, particularly when you're having your zero session, your first session before you play, that background, the party background, is more important than the character background, because it's not important about whether your particular rogue joined a particular guild and what they did before they started adventuring, because their adventures are going to be based off what happens for them during the adventure that you're going to run with them. It's about the party background. So for example, my current group, we got together and we decided that our party background is we're all part of Knights of the Unicorn, which means we all have a single focus. The Knights of the Unicorn have a particular focus. We're into drinking it up large. We believe in being generous. And really we are a bunch of very young individuals who really get up to a lot of trouble, but have good motivations, even if they might come off as being a little bit odd. And we don't kill people unless we have no other choice. We don't go running around killing monsters and so forth. Instead, we let somebody else do that. And that is what binds us all together. So it's really important to focus on how a party has a background and how each one, you might have a different reason, but you're all working towards the same thing and your background is very, very similar. Otherwise, you know, I really don't think that the strong factor is you all meet in a tavern and you decide you're going to go off and do some adventures after having a few drinks. It's not really been my favourite lead into any adventure. Hi Mike, how's it going? What do you got here? Hey Fred, it's bedtime here nearly. Sorry man, I'm so sorry. But I'll be watching the live stream for an hour maybe. I told you I was beginning to paint minis a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, okay, good. I now have 30 of them painted up and 10 to go. Nice, well done. That's excellent, man. You're probably going to get through a lot more than I do. I just don't have any time. Hi Wally, how's it going? I just watched your new puzzle video. For those of you who don't know anything about Wally, Wally DM has a channel and he does puzzle videos and they're very, very good. What's that, Wally? Always dig the hats. Do you have a favourite? My favourite is the one with the bats and the moons on it. That's my favourite. You tend to see me in it quite a lot when I do show my face. I don't obviously show my face all the time. Sometimes I'm pointing the camera and I have one camera operating at the miniatures and the desk with the map. But I do have a hat for that particular purpose. I just thought I would go with the silver hat today rather than the standard one that I use. Hence why I'm wearing this one. So tomorrow I'm going to be painting miniatures. And I think I already mentioned that my timetable changes, so that means you're going to probably get a lot of live streams over the next 5 days. Today, tomorrow, then I go to work on Saturday, then I'll be back doing more live streams on Sunday and Monday. And I haven't decided what I'm going to cover on Sunday or Monday, but we'll see how we go. I'm sure I'll come up with something. That's just code for I'm working on something, but I don't want to tell you until I know I've finished it. So I was looking at monsters and I noticed there is a channel I would like to talk about that I'm sure a few of you might have already noticed, and that is the DM Lair. I would go and check out his channel. He does very good videos. He has good advice. He has a Q&A or questions and answers live stream session that he runs from time to time, and I would certainly consider going and checking out his channel, not right now but later. He has some good advice there for anybody who is a new dungeon master or an experienced dungeon master. And I was watching Taking 20s, this is Cody, his channel. I was watching his video on combat and how the way Dungeons and Dragons 5e handles combat. And what he was talking about was how he wasn't happy with some of the decisions made. That he's happiest with Dungeons and Dragons 5e, but how he's not happy with some of the things that he thought were staples to the game mechanics. And I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and the game mechanics, because there are a whole lot of things I think a lot of people have forgotten about Dungeons and Dragons 5e and combat. And of course I just cover the basics in terms of the rules. I don't usually do a lot of rules on variant stuff. What's that, Mike? Oh, also next weekend I'm running my first adventure for some new friends using 5e. Awesome, Mike, that's great. It's out of a home brew campaign that you've designed. Got any tips for a Dungeon Master mapping part? I've had a battle grid map. I have a battle grid map. Okay, oh Matt. Look, my advice is try to photocopy what maps you can so you don't have to draw them all. Make sure you have a good sharp pencil and more than one. Baking paper is easier to trace through, but it's also it's not very easy to work with. So when you grab your paper, try to find some photocopy paper or tracing paper that you can see through easily, because your standard photocopy paper isn't very easy to see through, and when the lights are dimmed and it's dark at night, it's very hard to actually see what's going on behind what you're trying to trace over. So if it's a map that you know really well, you won't need to worry about that sort of thing, and tracing over something won't be necessary. And since it's homebrew, that's not going to be an issue. I tend to just draw out a section of the map, and at that time, while I'm drawing and the players are sort of sitting there waiting for me, I will often make that part of their decision-making process. So I'll say, okay, what are you going to do? And they'll start discussing things amongst themselves, but while they're doing that, I'm still listening, but I'm drawing out the next part of the location that they are exploring. And that's how I deal with my map drawing. If you're using a battle grid, it's often almost impossible to draw the entire map out on the battle grid as you go easily, because sometimes your maps are so large and your battle grid is just not big enough, or your table, the table's just not large enough to accept everything that you're going to put out, and so you have to draw sections of it. So that's my advice with it when it comes to drawing out maps. I probably should do a few more videos on drawing maps, but to be honest, I'm not the best person at drawing maps. I mean, I can do it. I would say somebody who takes a lot of time is Nate from WAS20. He does really good maps. I don't know necessarily if he's what his maps are like when he has to draw them out fast and quickly. I know some dungeon masters like to draw the entire map out and then just lay down sections of paper and tape them in place, or blue tack them into place, and then just whip off the blue tack to remove what essentially is the fog of war. I know a bunch of people have been asking me to do a video on how to deal with the fog of war with maps, and I haven't really seen a solution that doesn't revolve around a lot of extra work. That's something that you wouldn't really be able to figure out yourself. So hence I haven't done a video on the fog of war. And maybe I'll come up with a solution in the future, but right now, not really. I do have a friend of mine. He has given me some stick-on whiteboard screen. It's very, very writable. So basically you can put it onto anything. And I'm going to make myself a miniature whiteboard that I can sort of just throw out there when I want to. What's that, Mike? Awesome mapping ideas. Thanks, fella. You are welcome. Not a problem. I'm glad I could be of some help. That's the whole point of these videos, right? Now, one of the things I did notice is I was looking at D&D Beyond, and there have been a few people who have been asking me to do videos on how to build characters, not just players but dungeon masters, so that their players can build their own characters easily and quickly without the dungeon master having to go through a lot of stress. And my advice to you as a dungeon master when it comes to players creating their own characters is get them to download a phone app. There's usually more than one out there. I've done reviews on phone apps before. I still think that the 5th edition character sheet is really good for what it is. It has pretty much everything there. You do have to pay a little bit of money. It's not very much. It's like a couple of bucks to get the full version. The free version only gives you levels 1, and that's it. And if you want additional information and be able to level up your character, then you can do that, but you have to pay a couple of dollars. And get your players to download that on their phone. You can build a character, doesn't matter who you are. It walks you through, it's so simple. You can build a character in 2 minutes. That's how fast and easy. Doesn't matter what level of experience you have. That's my advice. Another option that's free, and that is you can jump onto, or get your players to jump onto the internet, onto their computer, while they're at home, and build their character at home on D&D Beyond using the free version. I'm not suggesting going and buying the pay version. You can if you want, but you don't need to. That won't give you all of the options, but it will certainly give you enough of an understanding, because there's 3 possibilities there. There's the one that walks you through the whole process, so it will highlight the things the players have to do, and then there's the quick random option, and then there's sort of just a fast build. So there's 3 different ways of building a character, and get them to use the step-by-step version for building a character, and just get familiar with doing that. Even if they can't build exactly the character they want, all of the stuff that's in the SRD, the standard reference document for Dungeons and Dragons, is in there, and you can go and you can access that really easily as a player or a dungeon master for building characters. Otherwise, suggest that they simply just print off some of the pre-generated characters, and I've done videos on pre-generated characters before. Print them off, and you can get that off the Dungeons and Dragons website. There's a whole section, not just the starter Dungeons and Dragons pre-generated character sheets, which allow you to go from levels 1 to 5, and it levels it up for you. It explains how to do that. They also have a raft of other characters and classes that are beyond the standard staple of fighter, cleric, wizard, and rogue, and you can download those, and that gives you levels 1 right through to 10, and it's leveled it up and done all the maths for you, and it's done the character sheet. All you do is you just print it out, and that's what I would suggest to your players to begin with in terms of building characters. Just need a drink of water, guys. So I'm hoping that people didn't misunderstand the video that I did yesterday on Dungeon Masters talking less. It was not in any way supposed to isolate me from other people, or to give Critical Role a hard time, or Acquisitions Incorporated a hard time, or play one off the other. It was simply as an example of what I find to be pretty standard for any kind of table. You know, any kind of table where there are people playing at the game, you will find they tend to fall into your pretty average person has a pretty limited attention span, so you have to get your information out quickly, otherwise you lose them, and then you start winding up with behavior issues and frustration and people not coming back. And Wally, your example was fantastic. When I read that, and I was feeling like, man, I wish I had said what you had said in there, particularly around the body language stuff, and I was thinking, that's actually a topic I could do. Wally, not at all. The less talking video was extremely helpful. Well, I'm glad. I did notice that in the time frame of about 3 hours, I had quite a few people who unsubscribed, and I'm hoping that isn't because they got a bit annoyed because I wasn't able to stream at the time I said I would. So yes, if that happened, I do apologize to those people if they ever come back to my channel. All right, what's this here? Ah, yes we go. Templar, how's it going? Hey there, glad you got into the house. Yes, and just so that you know, a tip. After I've learned the hard way, this is my car key, and I have my car key on me when I go out, obviously to use my car. I now have my house key attached to my car key, and I recommend that you make sure that if you buy a new car, that you do not carry around the other set of keys on a separate keychain. It's not a good idea. Make sure the house key is on the car keys, rather than on a separate set of keys that you forget and leave in the house, which is what I did. Anyway, it's no longer an issue because I have put a set of keys on both keychains. And I'm so glad that I left a set of keys with my mum, otherwise I would still be outside. Okay, what do we got here? Extension. What do you got here? Retracted message. All right. Well, I'm sure you'll get back to that. What's that? Okay, this name. I'm going to give me a second while I decipher the name. This is Daylon Charlatan. I'm just going to say Daylon Charlatan, and then I'm going to call you just Day after that, because otherwise it's a bit of a mouthful. Hello from, what's that? PA. USA. PA. Whereabouts in the USA is PA? I know it's a shortening, I just don't know the shortening. I know where the United States is. It's a huge continent, I know where that is. I hope you could briefly discuss how you might handle players metagaming. Oh my gosh. I'll tell you what. Give me a second, because I've been working on some notes on how you can metagame the Dungeons and Dragons to the extreme. And this might actually answer some of the questions that you have. Because I was looking at it. Hang on. Oh, let's grab it. So I have little notebooks all over the place. And honestly, I spend a lot of time writing notes in this late at night, sometimes not late at night, but often late at night, preparing myself for the next video. And there is a section on metagaming. And I've actually titled this one, Metagaming the... How can I say this without getting into trouble? Metagaming the heck out of Dungeons and Dragons, and some of the ways that you can do it. So that might answer some of the questions about how to stop people metagaming. You've got to understand, first of all, that metagaming is built into the Dungeons and Dragons 5e rules now. It's very much part of that. A lot of the rules and basic mechanics are there and built in, and I don't really think that metagaming is something you need to concern yourself too much with. There's good metagaming and there's bad metagaming, and you've just got to get around what you consider to be bad metagaming, what is good metagaming, and have a discussion with your players about it. Now, you can't always do all of that in a session 0, otherwise the session 0 would be hours long and you would never get a chance to actually play the game. And as you know, for those of you who watch my channel, I'm all about you watching less and playing more. Okay, so here's some of the things I've put down. Reading published Wizards of the Coast adventures. So this is something that players will tend to do. Not all players do this, some players do. It is quite often a product I find with Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League, which is the organized play for Wizards of the Coast, and they can replay the same adventure multiple times, and so therefore there's going to be metagaming taking place. So how do you deal with that? Well, there's not much you can do with Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League. They're going to metagame. What you have to do is, if they've played the game, it's nice if they tell you, look, I've played this adventure before, but I will take a back seat. If somebody has read the adventure, that's not necessarily the end of it. As long as they take a back seat and don't use the information they collected during that adventure to drive the party to where all the treasure drops are, warn them of all the monsters that are located in different locations. And with a pre-generated adventure, when I ran Curse of Strahd, I had one dungeon master in my group who had already run the adventure, and I had a couple of players who had already played partway through, and they were going to metagame. I knew they would. They told me in advance that they wouldn't, and they would try their best to take a back seat. But I knew for a fact that it's very hard to do that. Consciously you're thinking, okay, I'm not going to metagame and take that information into the game and divulge it, but subconsciously that's a little bit more difficult. So I changed things. So with published adventures, if you know that somebody's already read the adventure, change things up, move things around. Don't leave things exactly where they are, and and make it clear to players if they have read the adventure that they not use that information. And if they can't do that, really it's up to you to decide how you're going to deal with that. Honestly, I just change things, and all the information they thought they had is no longer of any use to them whatsoever. So that's one aspect of metagaming. But we'll come back to metagaming. I'll leave the page open, but we're going to go down through the chat just to see how we are dealing with everybody's responses. Hexon, Exon, Ext, 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 Exton, Exton, Exton. I'm going to say that's a nice bling hat. Yeah, holy Toledo. Yes, it is a bling hat. It very much is. I have a very bright, sparkly blue and a sparkly red as well. We'll wait until Christmas for the red one. I have a whole bunch of Christmas hats as well. What's that? Better Grunge. Hello from Brazil. Yes. Well, hello from New Zealand. I'm in New Zealand, and welcome to the stream. Day. Sounds good, mate. Sounds good, man. Yeah, okay. So that covered your pre-generated adventures and metagaming. The northeast near New York. Okay, near. I know where New York is, so I know you're near around that location. Got it. Brian. Hi, Brian. How's it going? Glad to see you got in your house. Yeah, mate. It's been a weird one today. It certainly has been odd. I don't think I've locked myself out of my own home ever. This is the first time. And I have been looking at my car keys and thinking, oh, I really should put my house keys on there, because what happens if I forget my other set of keys and I lock myself out of the house? And I've been really, really fortunate because my brother-in-law is always home, apart from today. And my sister works, and today is my day off. So it didn't quite work out the way I thought it would. But anyway, it's solved. It's done. I'm in the house. What's that here? What do we got? Extension. Any tips on how to engage players in conversation between two NPCs? Okay, so here's one of the things I find really frustrating with the application of more than one NPC at a time. One NPC for the players to interact with is enough. Two is getting tricky, and more than two is entering into the realm of you as a dungeon master talking to yourself. You giving the players too many people to talk to, and you're dealing with too much now. My advice to you is to try to stagger them. So rather than have all of them in the same room or location at the same time, try not to do that. If you have no choice and you have two NPCs and you want the players to engage with them, then you need to start the ball rolling. Start the conversation. If you don't start the conversation, then you're leaving it to the players to be driven enough and interested enough to interact with your NPCs. And if you've got a group of slayers, power gamers, and people who like to just bash things and take their treasure, that's never going to happen. So my advice to you is lead them into it by starting the conversation, and once you've done that, okay, keep going. If you have two NPCs, make one of the NPCs the main voice and the other one is sort of there, and they can ask questions, but they won't actually speak that much. They're simply there in the background, really to interact with if somebody else in your party decides that's something they want to do. That's my advice to you. If you always lead in first. Another good way of getting players to interact with NPCs is to do something that's unusual and out of the box. If you always present all of your NPCs or non-player characters the same, and you do not need to role play the barmaid and the shop attendant at the general store, you can just whip through that stuff. Focus on the ones that are important and give them something that makes them stand out. I think that Chris Perkins' Out of the Abyss is a really good example of a huge number of very interesting NPCs that players will want to interact with. And you can pluck them out and plop them into any adventure you wanted to. So making them interesting, even they don't make them all human. Making them all human can be a bit dull. And I'm glad that was helpful to you. Okay, so I've answered all the stuff on the chat so far. Let's go back to talking about metagaming, since that seems to be a topic. Now, you feel free, for those people who are in the live stream, Feel free to ask questions about anything that you would like regarding Dungeons and Dragons, and I will do my best to answer them. But I'm going to work my way through these topics, which I will do as a video in itself, but not today. I'm taking these points as just parts we can talk to. By the way, I believe that WebDM has done like 3 videos on metagaming, and I think that's a really good resource for you to go and check out too, by the way. Not right now though, later on. Okay, so here's another one. Reading and memorizing, metagaming by the players, reading and memorizing the monster manual. So here is one of those aspects to the game that I do myself. To be honest, I probably know a lot of the stats in the monster manual, so when I'm a player and I'm facing monsters, I know how many hit points they have. And it's very hard for me not to reveal that. So even though I'm sitting here and I know that the kobold has 5 hit points, I don't go and tell that to everybody else. I usually stay quiet. But there will be somebody at the table who will do that. And obviously that's the type of metagaming that seems to be the easiest for players to do. You're dealing with a lot of people who are very nerdy and geeky and have really good memories. They tend to gravitate towards Dungeons and Dragons, and so those people are the ones who memorize and remember all of this stuff. So as a result, you're working towards working against something that's really difficult to manage. But I want to just highlight to you one aspect to Dungeons and Dragons. Hit points and the monster stat block in itself, you should change that stuff. Don't run the monsters in the book as they are. Change them around, and that will help you alleviate the issue of metagaming when people have read the entire monster manual and memorized everything. Change things up. Look, Chris Perkins does it. Matthew Mercer does it. Many people do and continue to do it, and I recommend that you adjust things. Don't give them maximum hit points. Don't just take the average that's listed in the stat block. These are ways that you can alleviate that issue. And also too, when a monster loses hit points, even though they might not necessarily be taking injuries because they haven't lost that many hit points, and hit points represents a lot of different things and not just physical damage, you can describe it as such. You know, once they get to sort of like half hit points, you might want to describe that they're looking a bit weary. And this gives a signal to the players. There are going to be signals that the characters would pick up that have nothing to do with metagaming, that would tell them that the monster or whoever they are fighting is slowly wearing down and getting tighter and tighter, and more likely to wind up getting a fatal blow or a severe blow on them that will knock them down or kill a monster. Those things would actually be seen by the character. So it's not really metagaming quite so much. It's not so much of an issue to worry about. So don't concern yourself quite as much with that aspect of the game. Alright, Templar, what have you got here? When my players ask for directions from NPCs in town, I have them find the old lady who forgets the question while answering the question. Nice. The old lady who forgets the question while answering the question. Well, that will certainly have an NPC stand out. I would imagine that old lady is quite frustrating to your players, but very, very funny. And I highly recommend continuing to do that. It's probably going to be one of those characters that in your campaign you've probably used more than once. I have one called Cyrus, who is a snowboarding yeti, who I think my players have never actually spoken to, and he's kind of like an extreme sports yeti who snowboards down mountains, and often he will come to the rescue of the party for a very short period of time and then just disappear down the mountain on his board. He has his own snowboard because he's a snowboarder. That's what yetis would do. I don't understand why anybody would find that unusual. Snowboarding for a yeti is normal. So they've seen him on the mountain, skiing down mountains when they're in mountainous areas, and he saved their bacon a few times as well. So yeah, NPCs that stand out. Mike, what is this? Fred, what is your opinion on supplied random encounters, encounter tables? Okay, yep. In 5e Dungeons and Dragons, in the Monster Manual. No, in the Dungeon Master's Guide. To be fair, I don't think they're an issue. I actually I have a whole lot of information that I'm going to release to you guys when I get time. The problem is that I talked it all out and I have to sit there and write down all the notes, and it takes me a lot of time, so I don't have as much time as I would like to actually do that. I think they're perfectly fine. What I would say about random encounters and random encounter charts, like any of the random encounters that you get access to in the pre-made adventures or that are provided online, is that don't be married to the result you roll on the dice. Don't be married to that, because some things don't make sense. When you roll up something and you've just had a random encounter a day before in game time and it's exactly the same, that's boring. Ditch it. Roll again. Sometimes you'll see a chart and you think, well, actually, I like this one. I don't want to roll to see if I get it. Just pick it. Just take it. So when it comes to random encounters, I want to highlight that random encounters come in many, many different forms, and they're not always going to be combat. So just because a chart is given to you and it's random encounters and there's monsters listed there, those monsters do not need to fight the party. They can simply be, they could run away. They might talk and converse with the players. They might be tied up. You can do all sorts of different things. I have a slew of, as I said, random encounter videos I want to do, and I think I've only done, have I done one? And I think it was the trap rug. It was a trap room with a rug in it. It was supposed to be a random encounter. It actually wound up being more of a trap video than anything else. But I've got everything from floating castles coming to little girls showing up with bowls of fruit to give to the players' characters, to coming across a victim being sucked into quicksand. There's a whole raft of them. And so don't get married to the concept of random encounters being combat based. Random encounters can be exploration, the use of skills, utilizing the old Dungeons and Dragons 4e skill challenge, and I'm not suggesting that you adopt the same way of operating the Dungeons and Dragons 4e skill challenge into 5e, because I'm going to show you something completely different. Well, not completely different, but a variation on it that's a lot more flexible and able to contend with a lot of the things that the original skill challenge from Dungeons and Dragons 4e couldn't deal with. And Matthew Koval did a really good video on how to use them, so check that one out too, but not right now. Also too, just because you rolled up a random encounter, you don't have to run it. They're just there as a suggestion. And I know what you're saying. Well, if you're going to use random encounters and you decide, no, I'm not going to run that, what's the point of having the random encounter? It's not random anymore. You're just picking stuff, Fred. You're just picking the stuff that seems to make sense to you. Well, yes, you are. But who cares? You're the dungeon master. Random encounters don't necessarily drive the story forward. Random encounters often have different purposes. They can range from anything from developing a player character's story so that they can help tie in, giving them something to do because they haven't had an opportunity to do it with the main storyline and there's no space to do that, and a random encounter is the best place to do that because why not? You can utilize it to slow the party down, to speed them up. You can use it to confuse them. You can use it as a stalling technique. You can use it as a foreshadowing tool, so you can set up something for the future that you plan to do, but it's setting it up for now for later on. They won't understand what that random encounter or that little encounter was all about until much later on in your campaign. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I feel like I should do the random encounter video sooner rather than later, but it's going to take me ages to get through all the audio files. Okay, I need a drink of water, and then we're back to questions again. In my opinion, I like random encounters. I think they're a good idea. And I don't honestly have an issue with random encounters in any of the books. It's just how you want to use them. Oh, hi Chris, how's it going? Is the hat for Halloween or protection from alien rays? I don't know why you're asking that question, Chris. Of course it's from alien rays. It's designed, as you can see, it's reflective. It will bounce off all of the bad microwaves. They can't read my mind now because it's silver. And as everybody knows, wrapping tin foil around your head, particularly with a big sort of bulbous long thing at the top, protects your brain from aliens reading your minds and then making things happen that you don't want to happen, utilizing your fears against you. I know it's getting a bit strange now. It's for alien race. Templar, have you ever used the succubus? If so, how did you use it? Yes, I have. I have used the succubus. I used the succubus and it was my attempt at trying to be funny and utilizing the Wizard of Oz story. And I had the original witch. She was, I guess, more of a, I don't want to say it, she wasn't very witchy. She would be more like Elvira, Mistress of Darkness, than anything else. And she wasn't old and ugly or anything like that. So I presented her as a complete reverse to the kind of witch you are used to from the Wizard of Oz. And I had her have a couple of underlings. These underlings were on loan to her from a devil who had sent them to help her out. And I used 2 succubus unsuccessfully. It seemed it didn't work out the way I had hoped, and they essentially were trying to seduce the party, and it just didn't work out. It was my attempt to try to, because I'd transformed the entire party into goblins with the witch, and I was hoping I could string them along a lot more with the succubus or succubi, and it didn't work out. So not hugely successful on my part, but I certainly tried. So I can't give you any more advice on that because I haven't been successful so far. That is not to say that I won't try it again, because I absolutely will. Okay, what's this? Day, how's it going, Day? I travel to play DM. Okay, I understand, because I travel a long way to play and DM, usually for about an hour. Question: what materials do you bring? I want to be prepared, so okay, I get it. So I lug around a lot of stuff. What is your bare bones gear for DMing? Thanks. Well, nowadays, my bare bones is really just a battle map, some pens, the monster manual, player's handbook, because I don't have everything digital, and I have my phone, some dice, and the adventure, and a bit of paper. That's really about it. That would be bare bones for me. Nothing else. If I could drop it down more, I would. I can get away without using the monster manual, but there's a few monsters in the monster manual that are not on my phone apps, and therefore I find that frustrating when I'm running an adventure that I don't have those monsters available to me. And so that would be my bare bones. I do not carry the Dungeon Master's Guide around with me. I do not carry this book. I use an app and I look things up on there, and I've been blessed enough that my players will bring books themselves, and often when there's a magic item, and usually there's magic items that you'll need to access in the Dungeon Master's Guide, usually in the past I would have to call on that, but because I make so many custom magic items, I don't need to worry about that, because I usually have a piece of paper already printed out with that information on there, so I don't need to worry about it as part of my adventure. Or I say, I'll give you the details next week. Or somebody will say, I'll look it up later. It can be done. It can be managed. I've got away without using the player's handbook as well. If I had to go right down to the bare minimum, I can get away with just pen, paper, pencil, dice, and some basic idea of my adventure. I tend to use quite short adventures nowadays rather than the long pre-generated ones, but that might change. We'll see how we go. I'm reading through some stuff right now. Hopefully, Dave, that was the bare bones answer you got, which no, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't bare bones. I yabbered a lot. Okay, but I do understand your predicament, because I have carried around and lugged around a lot of stuff. Okay, back onto questions again. Mike, good ideas. I like the non-combative points for random encounters. Yeah, and there's a series coming, but I realized in the end, before I started doing it, one, it was a lot of work, and so releasing all those videos would mean I would have to have days and days of just nothing to be able to get it all together into one place. And I also realized that you guys needed the fantastic locations, or the locations series, to come out first, so that you knew where to put things. So it seemed to make more sense to give you fantastic Dungeons and Dragons locations as a series of videos first, and then give you the random encounters, and then follow up with how to rebuild your monsters, and stuff like that. And then of course custom magic items. I'll build some custom magic items live so that you can see how I go about doing stuff. They're not all going to be gold though, just bearing that in mind. Pardon me, I'm burping now. Must be because I'm drinking my water too fast. Okay, what's this? Q181, how's it going? Anti-Mind Flayer hat. It is an anti-Mind Flayer hat. Mate, I think that you've got a point there. I like the anti-alien rays idea too, but it works for both as it happens. Alien rays and mind flayers. They can still eat my brains, because I'm sure they can eat through the hat, but they can't read my thoughts. Shields. Hello Shields. How's it going, man? I'm just assuming you're a guy, so if I've made a mistake about that, I just assume everybody is, unless they say otherwise. How would, or how could you run big scale battles like a castle defense? Okay, alright, that's a tough question. So first off, I would say narrate it. I would say only run a small portion of the battle, and everything else happening around the players is narrated. Dungeons and Dragons is not equipped to deal with big scale battles, and the rules around large scale battles that Mike Merles and the Dungeons and Dragons design team have offered up, I feel are not really that helpful, because they still look like a single combat. So as a result, why would you bother? And it's just too much number crunching going on. Too many hit points, too many numbers, too many numbers to take off. So I would forget about that sort of thing. And I was a wargamer, so it's not like I don't enjoy that sort of thing, because I have enjoyed running big scale battles. And I have run big scale wars and battles in my Dungeons and Dragons adventures. I did that with the Rise of Tiamat, the Queen of Dragons, the evil Queen of Dragons. So the battle leading up to before they go into her temple, I actually played out the battle because I really felt like it would be more epic and interesting for the players. And what I did is I had small scenarios and other things were happening across the battlefield, and I would give them just a quick brush stroke about what was going on. And I think I did something like I had a couple of trebuchet that the party had to protect from dragons that were swooping in from the Cult of the Dragon, and they had to protect those and stop them from being destroyed. It gave them a combat, it gave them a very small little encounter, and it gave them an objective that involved more than just trying to destroy and kill the dragons or drive them off. They also had to protect the trebuchet or the catapults from being destroyed. This is a good way of incorporating it. I also included a battle while they had mounts. They were all flying on dragons. I gave them each a dragon to control each. It was quite involved. It took a whole session to run. But while the party were doing this, the whole line, the whole force were doing similar things to what they were doing. And the outcome that they had was the type of outcome that everybody else had. So I didn't have to duplicate everything everywhere on the battlefield. Basically, the party's involvement was a microcosm of the whole battle, the whole full-scale battle. Does that really answer your question, Shields? I hope it does. But yeah, large-scale battles aren't really very easy to do in Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and I don't really recommend them anyway. I have done it, it's a lot of hard work. Okay, so I've got to the bottom of the questions, which is excellent news. And guess what? I'm not going to run away early. Since I made a mess of things, I'm going to hang about. And we were, yep, okay, I've got a question. Well, I almost went to my notes. Okay, Mike, what's this, Mike? Mike G. Mike G. I feel like, I wonder if this is Mike Gent. Is this Mike Gent? I'm going to assume it's not Mike Gent, but it could be Mike Gent. I know a Mike Gent. I'm speculating now. Okay, so what do you got here? Odd question. I have designed nearly a complete level 1 through to 5 campaign. My first ever. Well done. It's hard work. Is there a service that will look over, analyze, and offer suggestions for improvement and such, for a cost or not? I don't know of one. I know that you can certainly, you're from Canada. Okay, all right, I was just wondering, because I know of a Mike G, but you're from Canada. Actually, you've mentioned that before. I should remember that, shouldn't I, really? So there's not a service that I know of that will look over your adventures, but what you could do if you really wanted to and you wanted to get feedback is just produce a PDF, put it on the Dungeon Masters Guild, offer it up for free and ask for feedback. People will check it out. I think you'll find that Reddit and even Facebook groups are a good point and place to access that sort of thing. Certainly the Dungeon Masters Guild allows you to be accessible to many people, but there's lots of different ways of doing that. So there isn't really a service that will do that sort of thing for you. And to be honest, I don't think that it's important that you worry about your very first campaign being successful. Having written a whole lot of material and having somebody scrutinize it is kind of a bit unfair, because no adventure survives on paper. Okay, players will do stuff, things will come up, you'll come up with better ideas as you're running the game. It's always how it tends to work. I always found myself using just one page, using the Chris Perkins quick sheet, and he would just break it down into either adventure hook, what happened last time, the characters and who they are, the NPCs, and then locations, and then basically some of the encounters or things that might happen during the session, and that was it. There's nothing else, and it's really like one line notes, bullet pointed. Okay. All right. Shields. I just need another drink of water, but we'll get to you. Okay, shields. That is similar to what I had in mind when I was thinking up how a large-scale war would look like at the table. Narrative of the battle, greater than the number of actual crunchy mechanics. Yes, I think you're right, and that's how I've done it. I've taken microcosms of the battle, and that's where the players are. I found that giving them huge forces to control is always a bad idea, and getting the players to make strategic decisions that a general would make. Not every player is suitable to be a general, no matter what level they are, so it's not always going to work well that way. You're often better to keep the party together, and they are like a strike force. Within the army itself, your players' characters are a strike force like a Navy SEAL team or a SAS team. We have the SAS in New Zealand. I know in the United States you guys have the Navy SEALs, and I'm sure there are other groups as well, who are a small group who focus on objectives and completing tasks rather than dealing with the broadsword stroke. They aren't the tank division. They are those individuals who have specific choices to make and things to do that have a big impact on the overall battle, but they don't wind up finding themselves controlling a lot of different soldiers or troops. Does that make sense? And I've always viewed, and I encourage my players to view Dungeons and Dragons more like you're not playing Scooby-Doo. You're playing yourself as a Navy SEAL team where stealth, infiltration, deception, and subterfuge are your friend. And when you can't do that, then you resort to open blasting or the swinging of swords and weapons. Okay, Templar, what's this? One great thing about playing with a war going on is that encounters can be enemy troops probing the lines. Yes, that's exactly right. Probing the lines can be one aspect to it. I think what I did with my own group is I started with artillery, both sides trying to take out artillery, and then I started to deal with, now that we've done that aspect of it, we're dealing with those forces trying to break each other's line, the clash. But after the clash, and both sides are sort of, licking their wounds and dealing with their own casualties and their own dead, now we have an opportunity to start sending in small teams where there might be holes or spaces in the line. And you might not be able to do that at night, you might have to do that in different ways. And it's totally up to the players how to figure that sort of stuff out. You might, as a Dungeon Master, offer up some options, but you don't have to give them everything. They've got they've got more brains functioning at the same time than you do as a Dungeon Master, so don't do all the work for that. Okay, shields, how's it going? What do we got here? Also, what things would make more satisfying rewards besides just gold and powerful weapons? Okay, now I understand where you're coming from with this one, because how do you give somebody a reward or something they find rewarding and it not wind up being the standard gold and wealth and magic items, which of course in Dungeons and Dragons just one magic item can unbalance the entire game and require you to up the rating on your monsters and make a lot of changes you don't really need to change and you don't want to change. So here's how I would do it. Use inspiration. Grant them advantage. you do not have to give them advantage just because they were role-playing in the way that the player's handbook spells out. You know, just because they role-played their flaw and did something that was a disadvantage to them, that's not the only way you can give them a benefit. So inspiration that they can spend during the game. I would certainly consider making sure they can have connections or NPCs that will help them. Providing them with, now when it comes to providing them with something that's magical, I always find it interesting that a lot of the older adventures had permanent magic items, but they put out a lot of consumable magic items. So you can get away from a magic item overbalancing the power play between monsters and the player's characters by giving them magic items that are consumable that they can use. I already built in the ability to retrain their character out of session. I don't care what they do with the character, as long as they have the same gear and gold and they keep the same name, they can change everything. But you could, if you don't do that sort of thing, provide that as a reward to your players in some way. I feel like this is a topic I should definitely cover at some point. I like the idea, it's very, very good. I'm going to have to make a note of it. What other sorts of rewards can you have? Well, I know the temptation is to offer boons. Boons that affect the player's power and use. But don't forget that players like magic items, and not all of them need to be powerful weapons. I think that Xanathar's Guide to Everything has a really nice collection, and I did a video on the topic, Xanathar's Guide to Magic Items, but there's lots of people who have. A lot of those magic items are very common. They have minimal effect on the game. Often they are utility in nature, but they can also be really, really helpful. If you can provide a player or players something that feeds their desire to progress their character's story, that's another way of giving them a reward by maybe focusing on their character a little bit more than you normally would, including drops such as consumable goods, even mundane items. It doesn't have to be magic items. Often at low level, it's very hard to get a set of plate armor. It takes a lot of money and resources to get that. And so that's another way of dealing with that sort of thing. You can offer them other bits of gear that are in the player's handbook that aren't magical, that they may not have thought of actually putting into their kit. A lot of players don't fully kit themselves out and forget the fact that they have access to so many different tools, and the only thing they're using is their magic, their sword, and their shield, and their armor, and their class abilities. And they forget that there are things like 10-foot poles, and ball bearings, and animal traps, or hunting traps, things like bells, and string, and extra rope. All that sort of stuff is a way of rewarding them in some way. So yes, and also remember, by telling the players that they did a good job, that is a verbal reward. Whether you realize it or not, being told that you did a good job is actually going to lift them up, and that's another way of rewarding them. It's what teachers do, okay? They reward people by encouraging them, but if they did something well, they say it, they highlight it, and you can do the same thing. All right, okay, shields. What's this? I tried experimenting with items that could remind the players of the adventure. I think that's a very good idea. Often, a lot of the magic items I include in my adventures are tied into the adventure, and they're important to have them. They're not like so important that they have to have them, but they will make things much easier to achieve, and they have some tie to the characters. Look, Curse of Strahd is a great example of that, where a lot of the magic items included in that adventure help towards completing the goal that the players have, which is defeat Strahd. They need those magic items to be able to be more successful in achieving their goal, which is to defeat Strahd the vampire. Okay, so such as an item that was crafted by an NPC that was part of the adventure. Man, you got it sussed, mate. I should have read the entire sentence, but you got it right. That's exactly it. That works really, really well. Okay, Templar. My players wanted a house. Well, give them a house. I think that's a great idea. A base of operations. I know that currently my group is working on getting themselves a castle. I don't know how well we'll make that work, because castles are expensive to repair and they're also expensive to maintain. But it doesn't mean we won't try. Or a tavern, or an inn, or a shop, or a blacksmith, you know. Players getting access to having their own blacksmith or business where they can drop off all the stuff they collect, and they can, you know, that's their home base now. So yes, or go for, was it Castle Greyskull? Castle Greyskull from He-Man, base of operations. Okay, what else have we got here? Template you've got here. I got them a broken down house that they use their gold to fix up and customize. Mate, brilliant idea. Waterdeep Dragon Heist has a base of operations that the players, I think it's like an old inn or a tavern or something like that, a tap house, that they can restore, and that's their base of operations. So it's a really good idea to give them a base of operations, somewhere they can call home when they've finished their adventures, or in between, you know, when they're having downtime, things like that. Wally, how's it going, Wally? Any plans on playing Waterdeep Dragon Heist as a player or DM? I have no plans. I would like to. I haven't fully read I haven't gone through the entire adventure. I'm currently reading through Tales from the Yawning Portal. I finished reading Tomb of Annihilation, and I'm really suspicious that players will not enjoy that adventure. I feel like it's so brutal and so nasty, that it might not be the kettle of fish. I still think it's a pretty cool idea. I just don't know that it's the right thing for the group I'm playing with right now. And it's also a huge investment in time. I've been using the Book of Lairs and prepared a dozen short adventures most of the time. I like the idea of Dragon Heist, but I'm much more interested in the Mad Mage. Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is coming out, I believe, this month. It's now November in New Zealand, so around the 20th or just before the 20th, the new adventure book will be released, and I think that is going to be much more interesting for the people I play with. That doesn't mean that I will be playing it, because right now John Paul is my dungeon master, and I'm playing as a paladin sorcerer, and I'm going to stick with that for as long as I can. And when it's my turn to cough up and be DM, it's gonna happen. But I've been DMing for years now, and so taking a break's kind of nice. Yeah, so no plans, but I think it's a really good adventure and worth people's time. It's just a shame the book is full of smudging and double printing, double ups. Okay, Mike. Mike. Should I be familiar with my players' characters' classes? You can, and if you're worried about them cheating, you could. But honestly, just the basics. Just worry about the basics to begin with. You know, just the core rules. How to make attack rolls, how to make skill checks, how to make saving throws. the basics of combat, you know, move, action, bonus action, interactions, that sort of stuff, how reactions work, the ready action, dodging, disengaging, shoving, grappling. That's enough stuff as it is, and that's a lot of information, you know. So hiding, those are the things you want to worry about. All the player character stuff, man, I didn't worry about that sort of stuff. Not to start off with, not when I first DMing Dungeons and Dragons 5e. I picked that up as I went. I made heaps of mistakes, you know, or players got a few things past me that that I wasn't aware of. But you'll be surprised. People, you give enough time, people will pick up on it and work towards encouraging players to role play and use the rules as they are. Just how it is. Okay. Or should I leave it to them? Yeah, I'd just get familiar with the core stuff. Just the core stuff. You've got it right. Okay, Wally DM, thank you for a great answer. Agreed. I'm glad it was. I think personally that Waters Deep Dragon Heist, even though there's printing issues, is one of the best written adventures I've seen from Wizards of the Coast, short of Lost Mine of Phandelver. I think Lost Mine of Phandelver, even though it's got lots of problems, is just so simple and easy to run compared to everything else. It reminds me of Keep on the Borderlands, which I've run, and I ran it using the Dungeons and Dragons 5e rules, using a conversion, and then I had a look at the conversion compared with the original one, and I was like, why did I even bother? I didn't need to convert anything really. I can do all of this as I go. Piece of cake. I am also really looking forward to the Mad Mage module. Look, who isn't excited about the idea of Undermountain? And multiple levels. They're going to give us every level. And if it's anything like the map that is in the Halls of Undermountain, they might only include descriptions and information on a small part of that dungeon and leave the rest for you to flesh out and fill yourself, which is how the original adventures were written. They were often written in such a way, Keep in the Borderlands is like this, and some of the older adventures, where they would give you quite a lot of information, but they would leave holes, and they would say, you create this location or room, or you create the trap here, or you come up with some sort of treasure, and they had already provided you with a whole lot of samples and examples to use, and they usually included those spaces once you had already been playing the game for a little while. So I think it's going to be really, really good. If anything like Waterdeep Dragon Heist, it's going to be awesome. Okay, I need to have another drink of water. And I'm now into 72 minutes. I'm doing well. My voice is going to crack, I know it. But I still have a glass of water, so we'll get through this. Mike, I have been watching your HowtoDandD tutorials on basic mechanics, and they are really helping me, by the way. Thanks. You're welcome. I feel really bad that I haven't covered passive perception. I have talked about passive perception in other videos, but I've not actually done a video that talks just about passive perception. There's actually very few videos on YouTube. I know Nerdarchy did one. I know that Andrew Armstrong from Dawnforge Cast has done one. I've done one on passive checks, but not passive perception. And contests. I had a comment about how skill checks work with the shove action, and I haven't done a video explaining how skill checks work, but I haven't done one specifically on contests, which are a little bit different because it's not equal to or greater than. You have to, with a contest between skills against your player's character and your NPC, it has to be greater. A tie achieves nothing. And obviously if you get less, then you fail. So I feel like those are videos I need to do. I just don't know when and how I'm going to go about doing it. I want to do them as pre-recorded videos. It's just finding the time. I've still got stock to work through when I have available time, that is. And I'm glad that you're finding them useful, Mike. Shields. How often should I subvert the player's expectations? There's no golden rule. There's no secret message, no formula for that. You have to read your players' body language and how they're responding to your campaign. And your players' expectations, I always found that players come in with a certain expectation of what is going to happen. And your trick is like the magician. As a dungeon master, the magician. And DM Johnny is a magician, and he has a really good example where you show them one thing in one hand, but what they don't know is you've got something else in the other hand. So it looks like this, but it's actually something else. So show them one thing, but give them something else. And you disguise what you're giving them. And that will surprise them. Those are the things that players really like, when they can't read the situation and guess what's going to happen next. There's a trick to it. It always comes down to watch a lot of magicians and you'll figure out what I'm talking about. Okay. No magic rule, no formula for figuring out when to do that, by the way. Mike. I have to catch the rest of the stream tomorrow night, Fred. Understand, man. Go get some sleep. Totally understand. I got to be up early to work. Either another 12-hour shift. Oh my gosh, tomorrow. Love the videos. And keep them coming. And please, see you around. Yeah. Look, hopefully my new timetable will work better for those people who have Saturday and Sunday off on the other side of the world rather than on the bottom end of the world in New Zealand. So yes, you'll see a lot of me around. That'll happen. Another drink of water. Okay. No questions are popping up. And I think what I'll do is I will just highlight another aspect of metagaming. Let's talk about players who peep over the top of the Dungeon Master screen. It's not always obvious if they're doing it, but you know, one of the simplest ways of eliminating that process is to get rid of the Dungeon Master screen. I know a lot of Dungeon Masters don't use a screen. I use a screen for a variety of different reasons, and I know a lot of Dungeon Masters don't like screens because it sets up a boundary. But if you're worried about them peeping over the screen, take the screen away and just have your notes face down. That's it. That's all you've got to do. And then you don't have to worry about them trying to peek at your notes. I think that if you're getting to a point where your players are, when you go to the toilet or go get yourself a drink, flicking over your notes and looking through stuff, if you know that's happening, you know, there's ways of dealing with that, and that's up to you personally, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. I find that given enough time, players grow out of that sort of silly stuff. It's usually a product of them thinking that they are playing against you and that you are working against them. And which is why I always try to provide guidance to my players when they look stuck, so they don't always think that I am trying to work against them, that I am trying to work towards them having a successful outcome. And that means if they forget a class feature and I know it would work in this situation, I will remind them. You know, one of the things I do not like at the table, and I think is poor, and that is when another player reminds the Dungeon Master that this monster hasn't made an attack or done anything, or that they have forgotten to do something, or provides advice to the dungeon master, or offers additional information that wasn't present. And one of the other players says, don't help him, or don't help them. Are you on our side or what? That's bad sportsmanship, man. It really is. You have just turned Dungeons and Dragons into a competitive game. And it's not supposed to be that. Dungeons and Dragons is not a balanced game. You're using dice. Okay? It's not chess. It might look like chess, but it's not. It's not a balanced game. It's not fair. It is just a way of playing. That's all it is. And yeah, it's not a competitive game. You're all cooperating. And success is nice, but also failure is entertaining too. So yes, part of the aspects of being a dungeon master is trying to get your players to understand that success is good, but sometimes failure is fun too. Okay, so we talked about peeking over the dungeon master screen. Here's another one, another metagame that, or a way of metagaming, that is insisting everybody at the party get to roll a 20-sided dice if a check is clearly lower than you would hope. So this is the player who says, look, we should all get to make a perception check, or we should all get to make that check. You know, and the reason they're doing that is they know that the first person who rolled the dice got low, and that's metagaming. Now, in some cases it won't matter, and everybody rolling dice is fine. But I think that's a choice that a dungeon master makes rather than a player makes. So don't get bullied into that sort of thing. If your players are saying, oh no, we should all get to make a check, I should be able to re-roll this, your first question should always be, why do you want to make another roll? Because you don't know the outcome of that low roll. You don't know that you did badly. Usually I think the concept of metagaming and doing really badly will be obvious to a character, and so I can understand them wanting to re-attempt a task if they feel they did a really bad job. But something like a perception check, you will never know if you did a really good job or not. You'll have no idea. Something like a skill check, and then wanting everybody else to be able to make a skill check as well. Well, if you're going to make a skill check for stealth, you should have all been making that stealth check at the same time. You should have made it clear from the get-go that everybody was going to be sneaking around, not just one person. If you're dealing with perception, if there's only one person checking the door and only one person can, then only one person gets to make the perception check. Everybody else has to live with a poor result. With a stealth check, getting a poor result is going to be pretty clear, because standing on a stick and it having crack or clunking around, that'll show up. But doing an average job, you won't know if somebody else has picked up your location. If you've done a really good job, you won't know if they've spotted you either. It's only when you've done really, really poorly with a stealth check. But with a perception check, it's impossible to really know whether you did well or not. Which is why we have passive perception as a mechanic in the game. Okay. Oh, here we go. Templar, here we go. My party is comprised of high school students. Yes, okay. Some of their grades are lower than what they should be. Would you consider using study aids for their classes tied to crafting and attempts in gaming? Okay, alright. So I have a friend who is a special needs teacher. And what he did, good night Chris, I'll see you later. What he did was he took Warhammer and all of the games that he liked playing, and he took them into the classroom when they involved measurement, mathematics, and anything that required any kind of calculation, anything that required problem solving. Oh, hi. Oh, good evening. Oh, good night, mate. Sorry, man. Chris, my mistake. Thank you for saying that. I'm getting tired. That's what it is. I'm losing my voice and I'm getting tired. But as a result of me making a botch of things, you get a nice long stream today. Okay, so what he did was he used measurement because he was playing Warhammer and Warhammer 40k. He utilized tactics. They were using dice, that meant maths, and this is low-end maths. But by using a 20-sided dice, you change the way maths is calculated. And I think you are onto something by utilizing that. He found that that got them engaged in doing something. And the fact that they will actually engage with him playing these games was more than anybody else could achieve. Because often they would exhibit disruptive behavior. And Chris, right spot on there, puzzles. You can introduce all sorts of puzzles, whether they be mathematical, spatial puzzles, such as even the likes of the Rubik's Cube, or puzzles that revolve around organizing and sorting things, geometric shapes. There's lots of, and even language problems, things that revolve around shifting letters and creating words. So puzzles are a good way of doing it. There's so many different puzzles, and Wally is got some fantastic puzzles on his channel, and I know he's been in the live stream. I don't know if he's still here, but go and check out his puzzles, because a lot of them are problem solving. They're very clever, and they would be really useful to you, I think, Templar, in your game. What's that day? Thank you so much for this. I bid you all a good night and happy gaming. Yes. Well, good night, day, and I hope you get a good night's sleep. Okay, that's we are starting to empty out, and I do realise why, because I'm running so long. Your Templar, yeah, check out Wally. He's got some good stuff there, and a lot of them are they're out of the box problem solving, and they have more than one solution, which is one of the best types of problems to give people, is something that has more than one solution, because it's making them use their brain. If you start getting them to problem solve, then that's going to really help. I find that crafting, you were talking about crafting, is a good way of getting people to utilize their hands to solve problems in a tactile way. A lot of people don't learn from listening, reading, seeing it, or seeing pictures or drawing pictures. Sometimes they physically have to do it. They have to do something to pick it up. I found that when I was teaching, that as a general rule, it's much more engaging to be tactile, which is why, yes, tactile. I made tactile boards for people who were blind. I made tactile boards for a variety of different reasons, and it's also why I have miniatures there and available, just in case I get a group of players who are very tactile, and me just talking isn't going to be enough, or me just drawing isn't enough, where they like to actually touch stuff and move things around. And I'm doing all of this all at the same time. I'm using as many different aspects as I possibly can. My voice, I'll show them, and they get to interact with it. So that's 3 that I can pick up on, because reading isn't so useful. It's very few people learn by just reading stuff. Very, very small percentage of the population, in fact, only use reading. I find people who just read to find out and engage and learn new stuff are usually made up of people who are audio. They need to hear it and read it, or they need to write it down, but they're very, very slim. A lot of people are a combination of all of those different styles of learning. Okay, so we've kind of gone very sort of teacherish But these are all things you can use as a Dungeon Master. They are all part and parcel toolbox that you can use in your games when you're running your game. Okay, I am going to say it's time to stop because my voice is almost gone. I'm starving. It's 5:30 p.m. and I need to go and do something else. Hello everyone. Joe, you've shown up. I was just about to go, but don't feel bad about it because I will be back tomorrow. But yeah, it's a little bit like that. Sorry, Joe, but I will be back. I don't go away for long. I don't lock myself out of my house that often. Okay, so let's finish up. Yeah, thanks, man. No, I was locked out of my house at 1 p.m. just before 1 p.m. So it's taken me a long time to get into the house. Hence it's been a bit weird. Anyway, let's do our final sign off, and hey, thank you for everybody who showed up. Oh dear. Okay, so if you found this video helpful, informative, or entertaining and useful to you, great. Please consider liking and sharing the video. Now, if you like this sort of content for Dungeon Masters, I do questions and answers or Q&A for Dungeon Masters once a month. And this is my November video for Dungeon Masters. So if you like this sort of content, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't subscribed. Also hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. I often do videos for players and Dungeon Masters. Now, if you watched even a small portion of this video, hey, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. If you sat through the live stream, which is incredibly long, well done. That's a miracle. I have many other videos though that you can go and check out. Some are live streams that I have put up, some are edited down, some are pre-recorded, hundreds and hundreds. There's bound to be something you'll find useful, so if you watch more of those, you'll continue to support me so I keep making more videos. I don't do Patreon, but down in the description you'll find affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon. You know how they work. You go through that link, I get a small commission for anything you buy off through that link. For Amazon and the book depository, you don't have to buy the thing I have linked to, just go through the link and then search for whatever you want. And it doesn't matter whether the link is for the United States or Canada, it's still going to work for Amazon. Now, if you have any questions, your opportunity to ask questions was in the chat, the live chat, which we were just about to wrap up now. And thank you for everybody who showed up, I do appreciate it. But if you weren't able to be present for the live stream, nothing to worry about. That's what the comments section is all about. You can go and ask your questions down there and I will respond, and chances are it might even wind up turning into a video. That does actually happen from time to time. I do turn conversations we have in the live stream into videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.